Hello, this is Cryptolyze. I hope you are well. This Monday, 18 December 2023. We meet today to talk about BTC, to talk about crypto because a lot happened this weekend with a lot of news. We'll start right away. If you want to train and really enjoy bull running, it's simple. There is perfect, complete, free training available. It's through an educational journey that teaches you everything about blockchain, crypto, investment, technical analysis, and trading. All this for free in comments and descriptions. You have exercises, multiple choice questions, modules, videos, guides, everything to support you in your progress. We're going to talk about fees that affect almost all blockchains, including BTC, which reached its highest level in terms of fees for the last 20 months, with here on December 16 more than $10 million in fees for miners, which is rather positive, and which is a standard currently being pushed by ordinals. And the war that there is between the BTC maximalists who see BTC only as a transaction currency and those who want to build on BTC around why not ordinals and around everything that could be done. And it's interesting to see that it's not just about BTC. As I tweeted to you just yesterday, it's not just BTC, it's even much more than that. Because there is Polygon, Avalanche, Solana, BNB Chain, Arbitrum, which are having an avalanche currently. Not to mention a multitude of transactions which notably lead to Arbitrum going on vacation, where Arbitrum was not able to ensure the potential volume of registrations that there was on its blockchain. So we see that it is less than a day of transaction on Avalanche, and Avalanche manages to support Solana very, very far. So Arbitrum fell completely out and was not able to support. But next to it, we find ourselves on Solana with more than 1 million active wallets, and Solana, a volume which exceeded for one day that of Ethereum in terms of registration of NFTs once again. So we can clearly see that there is still something happening around Solana. A lot of people are talking around Solana. Avalanche is still very present. Matic also Polygon, at least in this wave of registrations, which is really a fashion clearly worn by the BARCT20, agree. We are really trying to recreate a dynamic of BARCT20 on other blockchains and on altcoins. And the other little interesting thing with Solana is that the Solana phone, so the Saga phone which was launched at the time, which was a flop, a huge flop, overall there is nothing that's been sold. They're currently there. No more available at all. The only ones are between $2 and $50 on eBay. For what? Because you are entitled to 30 million bonk when you buy the phone. And to know that the bonk, which is a meme coin on Solana, well, I don't know how many times, so obviously it became interesting to buy the phone if only to claim the 30 million banks and be able to sell them. That was a free phone, except that it's burning up as usual. It's still the only ecosystem where we see this, where we see a phone which is completely unsold and which therefore goes from $0 to $5,000 on eBay and which is completely out of stock because there was a little rotten crypto integrated into it. So it's really extraordinary. Finally, it's really the only ecosystem where we can see that in 24, 48, 72 to see things like that. We continue and we are going to look at Coinbase and the SEC. The SEC, which refused Coinbase to implement legislation around crypto, Coinbase suddenly attacks the regulator in court, namely that the SEC has still lost numerous trials against the crypto ecosystem. So Coinbase, I think, still has a possibility of being able to win, or in any case to assert his vision in relation to the SEC. And as a reminder, Coinbase is campaigning for the establishment of crypto regulation. The SEC does not want it. The big news, however, comes from Tether. Tether, which has onboarded the FBI and is preparing to onboard absolutely everything else. Everything related to American Secret Services and state services. And what's interesting is that I told you about it a short while ago. When Binance accepted the deal, I told you that Tether and mainly Justin Sun were next. And that Tether little by little showed its credentials with a blocking of certain wallets which were non-OFAC compliant. And so we now see that we are going much further. So that means that Tether is also trying to reduce the risks by involving the different U.S. services. And we find ourselves on a Tether which is therefore controlled by the USA. And if the USA controls Tether, you understand very well the implication that it will have subsequently and that it already has at present. At the macroeconomic level, what do we have? We have the quarterly GDP T3, which arrives on December 21. Very important. And then, on Friday, we have the PCE Corp validation. So we still have a lot of news this week, and know that it will really be the last big week of trading, given that the following week, which will be Christmas, will be very little traded, very little volume, and we will have something that will be relatively flat. Flat, yes, but this will not be the case for the S&P 500, in which we still had a nice close candle, and we are off to a flying start at the start of the week. And what is interesting to see is that I think that we are going to really retest this ATH, or potentially break the 4,800, which is still going to have a big momentum, because we also see I presented to you this graph, which was the SPF 500 subtracted from global money printing, and what do we see? We see that this bar, which was really very hard, in which we had the subprimes, the COVID, the inflationary crisis, which had really hurt us, therefore very strong resistance, and we closed the week above, and we is potentially closing the month above. If we close the month above, we will have a real very, very strong signal to go and find here the top of the internet bubble, which for me potentially represents the intelligence bubble. Artificial. We will certainly discuss it in a separate video, but therefore that would mean that we would have a hyper-accelerating cycle at the level of stocks, particularly tech stocks, and in which we could indeed have, for example, a NASDAQ, which is really pulling itself away from the increase. And so we will have to monitor whether we have momentum like that building up. Why am I telling you this? Because when we look at the VIX, we see that we are really at the lowest, and when we are really that low, that means that no one is afraid. Really, no one is afraid. No one buys options to be able to cover themselves, so that means that no one is covered. If we ever have a reversal, it risks being violent, but it also means that everyone is rather bullish in the current market. And even when we see the TLTs, which represent the American 20-year Treasury bonds, we see that we have swallowed a large part. That was the warning I gave you. If we ever arrive in this area, it was really very complicated. And there, we managed to leave there again. Yes, but we are really in a classic retest zone. It would be necessary to consolidate above the 110 to reach much higher, the 130, etc. So for me, the real alarm to have is the breakdown of the 110 consolidation. There it will be very positive. If we still have a VIX which is low or even very low, and an SP 500 which continues its oscillation, that means that we will have something which in macro terms will be very positive. I really invite you to watch the video I made on Saturday, in which I return to my short-term macro vision. This is a much longer-term vision which I am explaining to you, but which will inevitably be linked between the two, and therefore you must watch this video if you want to have my vision, and in particular my great vision on BTC. BTC, in which we were rejected. I spoke to you about it on Saturday, about the risk of rejection of the blow which had this night, in which we had an opening which was quite aggressive. We are slowly moving towards the CME gap, always takes a little bit of time. If we really look at the short term, we see that we had a small break and a new gap, moreover CME, which has opened. We will note it immediately. And therefore we still see that systematically these are bearish or bullish attacks which take place at midnight. 1, 2, therefore covering the Asian market. So the only thing is that we didn't break the lowest. Okay, we maintained this level systematically. So for me, we don't has no bearish implication. We would have to break this level and take this level to get the gap to say that in fact we are really going to have our bearish impulse that we are waiting for to get 39,000, 38,000, or even potentially below. That's not the case, okay? We have made a bullish acceleration. We retrace very deeply. We are going to retest the lows, but we are not taking them. And we are leaving a CME gap above. So the probability of accelerating upward again, potentially looking for 42,800, still remains very strong, especially since we still have a lot of incentive to go a little higher. So yes, we have the incentive, but at the same time I remind you that here we are rather in a phase, hop, for me, which will look like this, of consolidation of liquidity, following the upward acceleration which was quite strong, and in particular the last acceleration which surprised a lot of people. So for me, we are in this phase of lateralization. Classic, in which we will certainly seek the liquidity at the bottom to then seek the liquidity at the top, or conversely seek the liquidity at the top to then seek the liquidity at the bottom. This is classic, in fact, in these phases of lateralization with the implementation of a trading ranging, and that we are still seeing quite a few things here. I took a little step back on the order flow here, where we can clearly see the upward acceleration of the price. We can clearly see here the deceleration of momentum at the level of open interests based on the Binance perpetual. At the same time, which is a little normal because Binance is losing a lot of market share. And when we look here at the open interests in aggregation, we see that we have rather something which consolidates. Okay, for several weeks we have had a good acceleration following this momentum, and we see that we are in the process of consolidating. So for me, there is a real sign of the establishment of ranging. And when we go a little further, when we look at the liquidation clusters, we can clearly see that we have a block at the top and a block at the bottom, which are in the process of tightening. When we see this, it is really symptomatic of a desire to create liquidity in order to achieve a very violent movement, which is either bullish or bearish, to surprise as many people as possible. This is something that we also see on the side of Kingfisher, in which we still have a big position. We're not going to hide it, above 43,200. At the level of this top here, we really have a big liquidity cluster, so really big short levers, which press very, very hard, so that implies that we will defend this zone, and that could really be the signal to have this bearish continuity. And this is again 37,000, 38,000, which we have been talking about for some time already, especially in terms of CVD. I told you that for me we were perhaps in this process to have something with a reacceleration. I was confirmed that this is not the case with a very strong deceleration still at the level of perpetual and spot, so that means that we are less and less aggressive. On the market, this also implies that there is a form of disinterest following lateralization. People were very interested during the acceleration phases, the push phases, the flows, and we see that as soon as we enter a delay, the market cools off, therefore cools down, and therefore behind us we have a market which is much less aggressive with much fewer orders coming in. Clearly, for me, we are classically in a phase that we find in December. At the end of December, we can have a small peak, especially with Christmas, in which we could look for why not the CME gap, retest the upper part. And what would we have validation for? A validation of a ranging implementation that we know and that we are used to dealing with, and which would last until generally the first 15 days, the first week of January 2024, where there would be either a bullish break with the potential validation of ETF, that is the rejection of ARK, and therefore behind a bearish breakout, which would lead to a retest of the lower levels in which we will project ourselves at that moment. But for me, what is interesting to see is that we have a liquidity flow which is clearly towards the total. 3. Despite here really the decline of BTC, in which we had a bearish pressure which was carried out on the total market. 3. But that prevents us from always having cryptos which outperform BTC whatever happens, and it is possible, beyond these cases, that we will have to look into little by little. Besides, speaking about this case, we are going to meet at 13:30 to talk about FTM, the phantom crypto which has not outperformed. We are going to ask ourselves the question why. And in the meantime, I suggest you look at all these cryptos there. You will have AXS, CODI, CQT, CRV, Flow, DCR, Dusk, Quantum, TRB, ZIL, STX, RSR, Link Injective, CAS, therefore CASPA, WOOF, HNT, Axel, TIA, RNDRR, BIT, Aleph, and BOO that I suggest you treat. Vote in the comments for the cryptos you want me to cover, and I wish you a very good day. We're done for the daily, and we'll see you at 13:30 for Phantom.